Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Iran will pay after it launched an estimated 180 missiles at Israel. Israel says it intercepted many of the missiles in midair, and officials in Washington say U.S. destroyers assisted in Israel's defense. Tehran claims most of its missiles hit their targets. There were several reported injuries during the attack. Officials in the occupied West Bank said a Palestinian man was killed in Jericho by falling rocket fragments. It's the second time Iran has fired missiles at Israel since April as the conflict between the two powers and Iran-backed militias deepens.
Social media footage of an Iranian missile exploding just north of Tel Aviv. The sky over Israel is alight with the fire of incoming missiles and the defenses taking them down. Israel says Iran fired over 180 missiles, but the majority were intercepted. This venue has been destroyed by shrapnel from one such interception.
We just ran into the shelter and, took a hide. I mean, it was extremely scary, nothing that we could have anticipated.
It was a massive attack of rockets. We were in the shelter, and we were something like 1 hour, and it was booming like crazy. All the shelter was booming, yes. And when we went out, we seen all the damage that was in all the complex, including all the houses.
I see where's the war going to, and I don't feel comfortable with it, and I hope everything's gonna be good,
Iranian state television published these images of what it claimed were missiles being launched. The footage could not be independently verified. In Tehran, supporters of the government gathered to celebrate. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said the assault was in retaliation for the recent killings of Hamas and Hezbollah leaders and Israeli military operations in Lebanon and Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran made a grave mistake.
We will uphold the rule we have set. Whoever attacks us, we attack them. This holds true wherever we fight the axis of evil.
Tehran has warned Israel against hitting back, threatening another response of its own, which many fear could push the Middle East closer to a wider war.
And Tanya Kramer is covering events for us from Jerusalem. Tanya, good to see you. Tell us more about what happened and what the situation is like now.
Well, I think a lot of people here woke up and taking stock of what happened last night, this rather unprecedented missile attack when, the alarms were triggered across the country. You could see it on this app that is on most people's phone here. Everything was red. People taking shelter in, protected spaces if they have one, or just taking cover wherever they were. Now, this didn't come totally without warnings. There had been some reports by intelligence that an attack by Iran was imminent, and also Iran had said that it will retaliate for the targeted assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh back in July, and now over the weekend the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. But of course, when it came with full force, and most people here I've been talking to last night said they haven't seen something like this. Now, most of those missiles were intercepted. Iran had said they launched these hypersonic so-called Fatah missiles, and it was intercepted by the regional allies here, the US and other countries in the region. But some also hit the ground, and it appears that the targets were mainly military facilities here. But again, the feeling was that this was all over the country. Now, the Air Force had said they're fully operational because some of the missiles apparently hit near an airbase in the south. It's not fully disclosed. Also, intelligence basis, but the damage has been rather limited as far as we understand. There were some fires, some hits in open areas, but there has also been one casualty reported by the Palestinian Rescue Services in the occupied West Bank. A Palestinian man was killed.
Now, Israel has in turn promised retaliation. What reaction can we expect?
Well, I think this is very much what's being discussed here now, and the government is still in security consultations about that, actually. But we heard it already after the attack. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened severe retaliation. He said there was a grave mistake and that Iran will pay for this attack. We already saw overnight Israel continuing its attacks on areas in southern Lebanon and also in southern Beirut, but also there were attacks in Gaza. But at the same time, of course, experts here saying Israel, there is a sense Israel has to retaliate to this and this has to be severe. Now, this discussion, what targets that would be, that could be infrastructure. We've seen that back in April when there was a first attack by Iran. Israel retaliated in a limited way, but this could be much more severe from targeted assassinations again, maybe the infrastructure. There's even talk about targeting nuclear facilities. So we have to wait and see. We're expecting a retaliation within days. That is what experts here are saying.
DW correspondent Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem. Thank you. And we can get some more context with Behnam Ben Taleblu. He focuses on Iran at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C. Welcome back to the show. Now, this is the first time Iran has targeted Israel directly since April, but this attack was different, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed, and pleasure to be back with you. This attack literally doubled the scale and the scope of the previous attack. If there were about 100 to 120 ballistic missiles, up to larger strike package of 300 projectiles last go around in April, this one featured just shy of 200, about 181 publicly reported medium-range ballistic missiles launched from Iranian territory directly at Israel. Unlike the previous strike, however, this was not combined with lower and slower flying projectiles that the coalition in the past was able to shoot down before even getting to Israeli territory. Those types of projectiles were land attack cruise missiles and suicide drones. Another marked difference, of course, is the fact that in the previous iteration, there was about a 10 or 12-day lead-up publicly where Tehran threatened revenge and indeed reportedly even warned international interlocutors. This time, Tehran lightly threatened revenge, delayed that revenge after the killing of Hania, and only gave anywhere between a 2 and a 4 hour heads up. So it literally doubled the scale and significantly shrunk the warning time.
Israel has vowed to retaliate. What do you think Israel could target in Iran, and is Iran prepared for it?
Well, I think the easier question, if you're looking at this from a military perspective, is the level of preparedness. Despite the Islamic Republic having several advanced Russian air defense systems and several domestically reverse-engineered air defense systems, even in the previous iteration when the Israelis responded to the April 13, April 14 attack, the Israelis were able to penetrate Iranian airspace with projectiles and target and radar of the most advanced Russian-provided air defense system, the S-300. So the chances of a successful aerial interception by the Islamic Republic of Iran is pretty much close to nil. The kind of deterrence the regime engages in is often deterrence by punishment rather than deterrence by denial. And as to the first part of your question, that really is the million-dollar question right now. Both the timing, the scale, and the scope of the Israeli military response is being debated. That response is probably not going to be limited to just inside Iran, even though the range of targets could include anything from the nuclear program to military facilities, the missile and drone program, the storage facilities there, you name it. And you look at the things that have been subject to cyber attacks or covert acts of kinetic sabotage in the past, it could be a very, very wide list. Plus, of course, a holding of Iranian interests abroad, be it the proxies, weapons depots, oil infrastructure across the region, you name it. But one thing I can tell you that probably will be a marked difference from the April Israeli response is that in April 19th, the Israelis did not claim the attack. I think for public diplomacy and deterrence purposes, they might actually claim this attack.
Now, we're looking at a textbook tit for tat here, aren't we? And Iran says it doesn't want an all-out war with Israel. But I want to ask you, isn't that precisely what the region is spiraling towards?
And indeed, as we get closer to the October 7 terrorist attack anniversary that touched off this regional conflagration, you have Israel fighting something of a 6 or a 7-front war, depending on how you count. And indeed, we are already in the midst of something of a regional war. It just depends on the level of ferocity and intensity and the geographic domain that you're looking at this thing through. And with respect, you mentioned textbooks. This entire ordeal from April to present has shattered textbooks. I mean, if you look at 2024, in the first 4 months of 2024, the Islamic Republic of Iran, a non-nuclear weapon state, overtly, directly, and conventionally attacked 2 nuclear-armed nations and lived to tell the tale. That's something during the Cold War neither the Soviet Union nor America did, and that's something now in the post-Cold War period neither America nor Russia have done. So it has really shattered precedents here, and the missile barrage that it fired just the other night, 181 projectiles, 181 medium-range ballistic missiles, that too marks the largest single ballistic missile barrage in one night in recorded history.
So much more to get to, but unfortunately we'll have to leave it there. Behnam Ventaleblu, Iran analyst with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Many thanks. Great speaking to you.
Thank you.
Well, Israel's military says infantry and armored units are joining its day-old ground operation in Lebanon, nearly a year after Hamas-led terror attacks sparked a devastating war in Gaza. Israel has moved some of its forces into Lebanon. It aims to stop Hezbollah rocket attacks across Israel's northern border, but there are concerns that it could lead to an occupation of Lebanese territory.
The Israeli army has released images which it says shows its ground offensive in southern Lebanon is already getting results. It claims troops have reached Hezbollah sites, including a network of tunnels containing extensive weaponry. Israel says it needs to hit the militant group hard in order to make it safe for more than 60,000 people to return to Israeli towns. Towns like this one, which are on the border with Lebanon. They've been virtually empty since Hezbollah's attacks on Israel started last year. The Iranian-backed militia began its offensive in support of another militant group, Hamas, which carried out the October 7th terror attack. But the history of violence between Hezbollah and Israel goes back decades. After Israel's last war with a militant group in 2006, a UN resolution was passed. It called for the establishment of a demilitarized zone that runs approximately 30 kilometers between the Israel-Lebanon border and the Litani River. UN peacekeepers have been deployed there for years to try to create a buffer zone between the two sides. Last week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reminded the UN General Assembly that the buffer has frequently been violated.
For 18 years, Hezbollah brazenly refused to implement UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which requires it to move its forces away from our borders.
Hezbollah has been increasing its weapons capabilities in southern Lebanon for many years. It's also built up its military infrastructure, including an extensive tunnel network, as seen in this video released by the group. Israel's army says its offensive against the militant group will be limited.
These localized ground raids will target Hezbollah strongholds that threaten Israeli towns, kibbutzim, and communities along our border. Hezbollah turned Lebanese villages next to Israeli villages into military bases, all ready for an attack on Israel.
But now that Israeli ground forces are in southern Lebanon, there's no knowing when they will leave.
And we're joined now by journalist Stella Mena in Beirut. Stella, there are reports of Israeli infantry joining the ground offensive and clashing with Hezbollah fighters in the south of Lebanon. What more can you tell us?
So the situation today is a little bit different because yesterday we only had the announcement of the Israeli army that they have started a ground invasion in Lebanon and that it is limited. But today we have more reports on what's actually going on the ground. As you've just said, there have been several reports about heavy fighting, not only in the air like yesterday, but also indeed on the ground. Hezbollah has published a statement saying that they have blocked Israeli troops from entering Lebanon and that there has been fighting, which we can just see as another sign that there is heavy fighting going on. Same as that some Israeli media are reporting that there has been a security incident. We know from these reports that in the north of Israel there are several ambulances. We hear about approximately 20 ambulances waiting at the border to Lebanon and are ready to evacuate soldiers to nearby hospitals. There have also been reports about military helicopters by the Israeli army evacuating soldiers. So there are several signs indicating that there has been heavy fighting and that probably it was not what the Israel army has expected. The army also announced that it will send more troops towards Lebanon, which is also a little bit what we expected, because Hezbollah is not so strong when it comes to attacks from the air, but is very strong when it comes to fighting on the ground. So for us here, it's not really a surprise that it seems like Hezbollah now is a bit stronger than before. Hezbollah has a lot of experience with fighting on the ground. They're really good in creating ambushes, so it won't be easy for the Israeli army to continue fighting in its ground invasion.
Moving further inland, strikes are continuing in Beirut as well. That is where you are. What's happening there in the capital?
Yes, just a couple of minutes before we started speaking, there was another airstrike on the southern suburbs of Beirut. The area is called Dahia. The night here, the last night, has been very hard for people in Beirut as the Israeli army carried out heavy airstrikes. Again, reports say at least 10 airstrikes have hit the southern suburbs of Beirut, and the sound of these explosions were widely heard in the whole city, which of course caused a lot of stress among the people again. But it was also a very hard night for people outside of Beirut, as there have been continuous airstrikes also in other regions. Reports say there have been at least 4 airstrikes in a town called Shufeit, which is like approximately 20 minutes far away from Beirut. And of course, the attacks on southern Lebanon also continue. We have residents from South Lebanon reporting that the bombardment there has not stopped during the entire night.
Journalist Anna Mena in Beirut, thank you so much for that.